Progressive overload is to blame. You followed everyone's instructions, all the big guys, your Dante Trudell, your Mike Mensa, Dorian Yates. You added weight to the bar, you got stronger. Somewhere along the way, you got completely obsessed with adding weight to the bar. That's all that mattered. Getting that one more rep, adding that 5 more pounds to the bar. And eventually, you woke up, you looked in the mirror, you realized you weren't any bigger at all. So progressive overload failed you, let you down. They were all wrong. It's a familiar story. I hear it all the time. And that's what I want to talk about today. But before we get into that, do make sure you leave a comment for the algorithm, like the video, subscribe if you haven't done this already. If you haven't subscribed, what are you really doing with your life? And if you're interested in coaching, there's a link in the description. So I want to get into this because it's a super common scenario. But before we get into it, we need to discuss a bit of background. What is progressive overload? And just walk through a few definitions to help me make my case. First of all, what is progressive overload? Well, the theory is this: as the muscle gets bigger, it is capable of doing more work, which in gym terms means you're able to lift more weight and you're able to lift that weight for more reps. So that's the idea, that there is this relationship between muscle and strength. And to understand this further, we need to just look at a few definitions. What is a progression marker in the context of progressive overload? The progression marker is an indicator that you are going to move up in weight. So the common ones are if you hit the top of a rep range. Let's say your rep range is 8 to 12. Once you get a certain set or sets at 12, you go up in weight the next time. That's a progression marker. Another progression marker might involve multiple sets. So if you're doing, say, triple progression, maybe you do 4 sets of a certain weight, and that's when you go up. But whatever it is, your progression marker is an indicator that you are ready now to add weight to the bar. Okay. And the next thing you need to understand is progression criteria. Those are details of the set, which you have to satisfy to make sure you are doing the right type of quality work. So what I would consider to be progression criteria are things like full range of motion. I generally promote a full range of motion for most things. Also, you may value things like the stretch. You may also value things like the squeeze and also pauses for each repetition. And also some of you may value a connection to the muscle. So when I'm doing pec flies, for example, I want to feel my pecs working. So those are all progression criteria. And that is factors within the set which you need to feel and experience to make sure you're getting a good rep or a good set. So just to summarize that before we move on, progression markers are indicators for when you should go up in weight. Now, progression criteria is more about the details of how the set is performed, quality of the set and the rep. So what should happen is you start with a range of progression criteria that you value. So for example, for a cable crossover, you may value the stretch. You also may value a pause at the stretch. You also may value connection to the muscle. So you may want to feel your chest. Now, you might not have the same progression criteria for bench press, for example. A bench press, your progression criteria might just be full range of motion and a stretch. But you have a series of progression criteria for each exercise. And you start with that when you start your training cycle. And the idea is, as you add weight, when you hit the top of the progression marker, you keep the progression criteria consistent. The progression criteria you value at the beginning of your training cycle, you aim to keep that consistent as you go up in weight. So what should happen is, if you started off with 100 kilos on the bench for a set of 8, you move up to 105 kilos over the course of many weeks, but you maintain the same progression criteria, the same quality of the workout, the same stretch, the full range of motion, pause, all that good stuff. Or in the case of the cable crossover, the stretch, the pause, the connection. You maintain all that, and that is part of your criteria for going up in weight. That is the quality of the workout. And you only ever add weight when you satisfy the progression criteria as well as the progression marker. Both are necessary. We're not talking about powerlifting, for example, where only the progression marker is valid. With powerlifting, you don't really have a great deal of progression criteria because powerlifting, you're just interested in moving the weight from A to B. There is no quality, really. It's just about legal form, getting the rep done. So that's what should happen. And if that happens, fantastic. If you can get your bench from 100 kilos for 8 to 120 kilos for 8 with all the same progression criteria, wonderful. You're going to grow. Great. So where does this go wrong? Where does the young intrepid muscle builder go wrong? Well, he goes wrong because he starts off with a certain set of progression criteria which he values. He starts off with the stretch, the squeeze, the connection, whatever is appropriate for the exercise he's doing. Now, you hope he starts with that. Some people just start with no concept of progression criteria at all, just go heavy, 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 and then aim for adding their plus ones whenever they get a chance. And so what happens is over the course of a training cycle, they manage to hit the reps. And so they've hit their progression marker and they're due to go up in weight, but the set just felt like rubbish. It felt like crap. There was no connection. It was hardly a full range of motion, no stretch, no pause. But they go up anyway because they are ignoring progression criteria. And they go up and they go up again and they go up again. The connection, the stretch, the range of motion gets worse and worse and worse and worse to the point where they get to the end of 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. They wake up and they realize, well, I'm a lot stronger, but I didn't gain any size. So they're onto Reddit going, I'm really strong, but I've gained no size. It's a very familiar story. So that is a problem which is not only occurring with your average trainee, but to be fair, a lot of influencers are exasperating that problem as well because they're capitalizing on the trainee's lack of knowledge. And maybe the influencer themselves doesn't really know what's going on either. So they will proclaim, yes, progressive overload doesn't matter. Don't focus on progressive overload. Don't focus on the weight. Focus on the volume. Focus on the range of motion. Lots of other things. And there are thousands and thousands of young guys who are just looking to get jacked, who have been initially led to believe progressive overload is the way forward, who are now going to believe that progressive overload is actually the devil, and range of motion, volume is the savior. And you know what? They will jump from one side to another and they'll probably make some progress. They'll make some progress because if they've gotten pretty strong with progressive overload and they switch to something with more volume, they switch to something with a better range of motion, some pauses, some quality work, they're probably going to see some growth. And if nothing else, the training will just feel better. And they'll start to listen to all the influencers who value the range of motion, the stretch, the squeeze, the connection, all that kind of stuff, right? But eventually that progress will stall as well because it's not the full picture. You need both. So what I'm calling for is some moderation. You need both. You need to have an eye on progressive overload, of course, but you also can't be sloppy. You also have to have an eye on your progression criteria. The reality is actually very simple. You need both. You need both. You do need to keep an eye on progressive overload. And if it hasn't worked for you, just have a look at the exercises that you got strong on. Did you get strong on sumo deadlifts with your feet out to the plates? And if you answered hand on heart, honestly, what did you think was going to happen? Right? Come on. When I was a powerlifter, I always deadlift conventional. And you've seen my back. It builds backs. So my point with all this is, it's not the fault of progressive overload. You fucked up. And yeah, it's not nice to hear that. I get it. It's not nice to hear that. I get it. I'm the bad guy. All right. The guy over there who's telling you it's not your fault. It's the fault of progressive overload. He's going to seem like a very appealing authority because he's telling you it's not your fault. You were lied to. And I'm here telling you, look, actually, it is your fault. You fucked up. You need both. You can't just throw out progressive overload. But at the same time, you can't get sloppy. You need both. If you genuinely go up with good quality work, you're going to get bigger as well. And really, that's the lesson for today. Don't give up on progressive overload. Just make sure you are going up with quality workouts. Now, one last thing before we leave. There is one exception. I don't think every workout needs to be absolutely perfect for you to progress because sometimes they are just steps towards the next progression. Let's say you're desperately trying to get the next 5 pound on the bar. Well, if you put it on and it's a bit sloppy, let's say your connection is not quite there, your pause is not quite there, but you just stick to that same weight and clean it up. Take a few weeks to clean it up. Fine. That's okay. So not every workout is going to be absolutely perfect. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. And also what I would say with progressive overload, you don't have to move up every single session. That's not what strength is about. You do the work, focus on the quality, and then eventually you wait for the adaptation to occur. That's it. Do the work, focus on quality, and wait for the adaptation to occur. Your body will do what it naturally is good at doing, which is adaptation. Just give it time. Okay. So hopefully you guys found that useful and hopefully it perhaps brought together 2 schools of thought. I have a feeling this video is probably not going to be very popular because it's a moderate video And YouTube likes extremes. People love extremes. If I was to sit here and say progressive overload is the king, or if I was to sit here and say don't focus on progressive overload, focus on volume, I'd probably get more views. But I'd be doing you guys a disservice. You need both. Both are important. It's a marriage. It's king and queen. Okay, folks, I'm going to call it there. Hopefully you guys are having a good day, and I will speak to you later in the week. Peace out.